Melissa C. didn't stumble gracefully. She didn't catch herself with a laugh or wave it off with a smile. She fell hard, fast, like gravity had singled her out. 1 second, she was descending the grand marble staircase with a tray of champagne flutes balanced perfectly in both hands, eyes lowered, posture immaculate. The way Jason Cornelius's staff was trained to move. Efficient, silent, invisible. The next second, her heel caught on the edge of a marble step worn smooth by decades of wealth. The tray tilted and Melissa's heart stopped. She braced for the crack of bone against stone. Instead, arms caught her so quickly it felt like magic. A strong hand locked at her waist. Another spread across her back, steadying her weight. Her face stopped inches from a broad chest in a charcoal suit. Solid. Warm. Real. Careful now. A man's voice murmured near her ear. Deep, smooth, touched with amusement. You're far too interesting to let hit the ground. Melissa's breath caught as she looked up. Fabian Crown. Jason's best friend. The one the staff whispered about like a forbidden secret. The one guests gravitated toward even when they pretended not to. Fabian's eyes held hers, sharp, observant, like he'd caught lightning and wasn't afraid of the burn. He didn't grip her tighter. He didn't trap her. He simply kept her steady until her legs remembered how to function. You all right? He asked. Melissa blinked, cheeks flushing. Yes. Fabian's mouth curved into a half-smile. Good, because I'd hate to see you hurt yourself in a room full of people who wouldn't even notice you were bleeding. Melissa tried to step back. Fabian let her, slowly, deliberately, like he was returning control on purpose. The gala kept moving, but Melissa felt the shift around them. A few heads turned. A few conversations paused. Jason Cornelius's events weren't just gatherings. They were stages, and everyone played their part. Melissa hated being watched. Fabian's gaze dropped to the tray on the floor, champagne pooling between shattered crystal, then returned to her face. I just saved you from a very expensive accident, so technically, you owe me something. Melissa's brows lifted. What? Your name, Fabian said, like it was the simplest request in the world, not a dangerous one. Melissa hesitated. I'm working. Fabian nodded, expression serious. Then consider it a work requirement. Rich people feel better about themselves when they know the names of the people who serve them. Melissa almost smiled. Almost. Fabian noticed anyway. There. That almost smile. I'll take it. Melissa's cheeks warmed. You're very forward. Fabian leaned in slightly, voice dropping. Only about the things that matter. Like what? Fabian's eyes dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second, quick, controlled, then returned to her eyes. Like the fact that you shouldn't have to disappear to survive. Melissa's heart kicked against her ribs in a way that frightened her, because she had been disappearing. Not to the other maids, not to the cook or the groundskeeper or the guards who nodded when she passed. To Jason. She worked in Jason Cornelius's estate. She cleaned his rooms. She served his meals. She kept his empire running invisibly. And Jason had never once truly seen her. Until now. Melissa felt it before she saw it, the way the air shifted when Jason moved. She turned her head slightly. Across the ballroom, Jason Cornelius stood with a glass of whiskey in hand, suit immaculate, expression carved from ice, body motionless like a predator measuring distance. But his eyes were locked on Melissa. Not on the mess, not on the situation. On her. It hit Melissa like a physical blow. Fabian followed her gaze and let out a soft breath. Ah, the emperor has finally noticed his kingdom. Melissa whispered, he's not an emperor. Fabian's smile stayed easy. In his mind, he is. And in everyone else's mind, he's close enough. Jason began walking toward them. He didn't rush. He didn't show emotion. But the path he cut through the crowd made people shift without thinking, like the sea parting for something ancient and unstoppable. The kind of man Jason was didn't need to raise his voice or make threats. His presence was the threat. He reached Melissa and Fabian and stopped close enough that Melissa felt the cold radiating off him. Melissa, Jason said. Melissa froze. He knew her name. Of course he did. He had hired her, had her file, her background check, her entire life documented in a manila folder somewhere in his study. But he had never said it before. Not like that. Not like he'd just learned it and wanted to taste it on his tongue. Fabian's brows lifted slightly. "Look at that," he said to Jason, amused. "Speaking to your staff like they're people. Personal growth." Jason's gaze flicked to Fabian's face, then dropped to Fabian's hand, still hovering near Melissa's waist, not gripping, but too close to be coincidental. Jason's jaw tightened. "Are you injured?" Jason asked Melissa. Melissa's throat went dry. "No, Mr. Cornelius." Fabian made a soft sound of interest. "Mr. Cornelius, is it?" Melissa didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Jason the way she'd been trained. The way survival demanded in a world where powerful men noticed you only when they wanted something or when you'd become a problem. And Melissa C. had just become both. Melissa C. had perfected the art of being nothing. For 8 months, she'd moved through Jason Cornelius's estate like smoke. Present but intangible, necessary but forgettable. She learned the rhythm of his mornings. Coffee at 6, black, no sugar. She knew which rooms he used and which he avoided. She understood that silence was currency and invisibility was survival. Jason never looked at her. Not once. He'd pass her in hallways, his expensive shoes clicking against marble while she pressed herself against the wall, eyes down, breathing shallow. He'd eat meals she'd arranged, never asking who'd prepared them. He'd wear shirts she'd laundered and pressed, never wondering whose hands had touched the fabric. Melissa told herself this was safety. In a world of dangerous men with dangerous appetites, being overlooked was a gift. Then came the gala. The fall. Fabian Crown's arms. Jason's eyes. Everything changed. The morning after, Melissa moved through the estate the same way she always had. Quietly, efficiently, invisibly. But the house felt different now, like the walls themselves were watching. Other staff members glanced at her sideways. The housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, asked twice if she was feeling well. The groundskeeper nodded at her with something that looked like pity. Melissa ignored them. She had work to do. She was carrying fresh linens down the second-floor hallway when she saw him. Jason, walking toward her with a phone pressed to his ear, speaking in clipped Italian. Melissa did what she always did, stepped aside, flattened herself against the wall, made herself small. Jason walked past without a glance. Melissa exhaled. Then Jason stopped. He ended the call, turned around, looked directly at her. Melissa's pulse spiked. Up close, Jason Cornelius was even more unsettling than from a distance. Ice blue eyes, sharp jawline, the kind of face that didn't soften even when it smiled, which it rarely did. He studied her like she was a problem he was calculating how to solve. "Mr. Cornelius," Melissa said quietly, eyes dropping. "Stay away from Fabian Crown." Melissa's head snapped up. Jason's expression was unreadable, but his tone was absolute. Not a suggestion. Not advice. A command. Melissa started. "That's not a request," Jason continued, voice low and cold. "Fabian is charming. He makes people feel seen, feel special. It's what he does. But you work for me, Melissa. You live in my house. You exist under my protection. That means you follow my rules." Melissa's hands tightened on the linens. "I wasn't. You were in his arms for 30 seconds, Jason said. "That's 29 seconds too long. He knows it. I know it. And now you know it." Jason stepped closer. Not threatening, but unmistakably invasive. Melissa smelled his cologne, expensive, understated, suffocating. "Do we understand each other?" Jason asked. Melissa's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to ask why he suddenly cared, to demand an explanation for 8 months of invisibility followed by this sudden, possessive attention. But she'd survived this long by knowing when to speak and when to disappear. "Yes, Mr. Cornelius," she whispered. Jason held her gaze for 1 more second, then walked away. Melissa stood frozen in the hallway, linens clutched to her chest, heart hammering. For 8 months, she'd been a ghost. Now she was visible. And visibility, Melissa was beginning to understand, was the most dangerous thing of all. The summons came at noon. Mrs. Davies found Melissa in the laundry room, folding sheets with mechanical precision, trying to forget the way Jason had looked at her in the hallway. The housekeeper's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held a warning Melissa couldn't decode. "Mr. Cornelius wants to see you in his office." Melissa's hand stilled. "Why?" He didn't say. Mrs. Davies hesitated. "Be careful, dear." Melissa had cleaned Jason's office 100 times. She knew the layout: the massive mahogany desk, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the bar cart with crystal decanters that cost more than her yearly salary. She knew which floorboards creaked, which curtains let in too much afternoon light, which corner smelled faintly of cigars even though Jason didn't smoke. But she'd never been inside while he was there. She knocked twice. Waited. "Come in." Jason sat behind his desk, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked up from a stack of papers, expression unreadable, and gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Melissa sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Every instinct screamed at her to stay small, stay quiet, stay invisible. But Jason's eyes were already on her, dissecting her in a way that made her skin prickle. "Do you know why you're here?" Jason asked. "No, Mr. Cornelius." Jason leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same cold calculation he probably used on business rivals. "You've worked in this house for 8 months. You've been efficient, discreet, unremarkable. Exactly what I needed." Melissa's jaw tightened. Unremarkable. The word shouldn't have stung, but it did. "Last night," Jason continued, "you became remarkable. Not by choice, I assume. But Fabian has a way of making things complicated. I didn't. I'm not interested in excuses." Jason's tone was ice. "I'm interested in making something clear. You belong to this house, Melissa. That means you belong to me. Not to Fabian. Not to anyone else who thinks they can take what isn't theirs." Melissa's hands clenched in her lap. "I'm not a possession. Aren't you?" Jason's gaze was steady, unflinching. "You live under my roof. You eat my food. You take my money. You exist in my world because I allow it. That makes you mine." Anger flared hot in Melissa's chest. "You never even looked at me before last night. For 8 months, I was invisible. Now suddenly I'm yours." Jason stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in the blue, the sharp edge of his jaw, the absolute certainty in his expression. "You were always mine," Jason said quietly. "I just didn't need to remind you until someone else decided to notice." Melissa's breath hitched. "Fabian caught me when I fell. That's all. Fabian doesn't do anything without intention." Jason's voice dropped, dangerous and low. "He saw you, Melissa. Really saw you. And now he wants to know what I've been hiding. That's a problem. I'm not hiding anything." "No." Jason leaned down, hands bracing on the armrests of her chair, caging her in. "But I am." Melissa's pulse hammered. This close, Jason was overwhelming. Power and control, and something darker she couldn't name. She wanted to push him away, to run, to scream that she wasn't his property. But Jason's power was absolute, and Melissa had nowhere else to go. "I don't share what's mine, Melissa," Jason said, eyes boring into hers. "Remember that." Then he straightened, stepped back, and returned to his desk as if the conversation had never happened. "You're dismissed." Melissa stood on shaking legs, walked to the door, and didn't look back. But she felt Jason's eyes on her the entire way. Melissa didn't notice the note until she was changing out of her uniform at the end of her shift. Her fingers brushed something stiff in her pocket, folded paper, crisp and deliberate. She pulled it out, frowning. The handwriting was neat, anonymous, chilling. "Your brother didn't die in a car accident. Jason Cornelius knows why. Ask him why he really hired you." The world tilted. Melissa sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the staff quarters, staring at the words until they blurred. Anthony. Her brother. Dead 2 years now in what the police called a drunk driving incident. Single car collision, no witnesses, blood alcohol 3 times the legal limit. But Anthony never drank. Not after watching their father destroy himself with a bottle. Anthony had promised her, sworn on their mother's grave, that he'd never touch alcohol. Melissa had screamed that at the police. They'd nodded sympathetically and closed the case anyway. She'd buried the suspicion to survive. Grief was exhausting enough without conspiracy theories. But now, holding this note in her trembling hands, everything came roaring back. The inconsistencies. The closed case. The way Anthony's boss had avoided her at the funeral. And Jason. Jason had hired her 3 months after Anthony died. She'd thought it was luck, a miracle job with good pay and housing included. But what if it wasn't luck? What if it was guilt? Melissa's hands shook. She read the note again, then crumpled it and shoved it under her mattress. Her mind raced. Who sent this? Why now? And what did Jason know about Anthony's death? She had to find out. Over the next 3 days, Melissa became a spy in the house she'd always haunted. She lingered outside Jason's office when he took calls, ears straining for any mention of Anthony's name. She memorized the patterns of the security guards, noting when shifts changed and which hallways had blind spots. She learned which doors creaked and which stayed silent. And she waited for her chance. It came on a Thursday evening. Jason left for a meeting across town. She'd overheard him confirm the time with his driver. The estate would be quieter, fewer eyes watching. Melissa moved through the darkened hallways like the ghost she'd always been, heart hammering against her ribs. Jason's office door was unlocked. Inside, moonlight cut through the windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk. She went straight for the filing cabinets. Locked all of them except one. She pulled the drawer open carefully, fingers trembling as she rifled through folders. Business contracts. Property deeds. Legal documents in Italian she couldn't read. Then she saw it. A tab labeled with a single name, Anthony C. Melissa's breath stopped. She reached for the folder with shaking hands, pulse roaring in her ears. The file was thick, substantial, full of secrets Jason had kept from her. Her fingers touched the edge of the paper. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Melissa's blood turned to ice. The footsteps were measured, unhurried, familiar. Jason's footsteps. He was supposed to be gone. The meeting was supposed to last 2 hours. The footsteps grew closer. Melissa shoved the drawer closed as quietly as she could, her heart slamming against her ribs. She looked around wildly. No time to leave, nowhere to hide. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle turned. Melissa pressed herself against the wall behind a bookshelf, barely breathing, praying the shadows would swallow her the way they always had. The door opened. Jason stepped inside, silhouette dark against the hallway light. He didn't turn on the lamp. He simply stood there, head tilted slightly as if listening. "I know you're here, Melissa," Jason said quietly into the darkness. Melissa's heart stopped. "Come out." Melissa fled to the garden at dawn, when the estate was still sleeping and the world felt temporarily safe. Jason had known she was in his office. He'd known, and he'd let her stand there in the shadows for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds before saying, "Get out. Don't come back." His voice had been cold, controlled, but underneath it, something darker. Something that suggested next time, there would be consequences. Now Melissa sat on a stone bench surrounded by roses she'd never learned the names of, hands still shaking, mind racing. Anthony's file existed. Jason had kept records of her dead brother. Why? What did he know? What had he done? "You look like you've seen a ghost." Melissa's head snapped up. Fabian Crown stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, expression concerned rather than amused. He wore a dark shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking more human than the polished version she'd met at the gala. "I'm fine," Melissa said automatically. Fabian tilted his head. "That's what people say when they're not fine and don't want to admit it." He gestured to the bench. "May I?" Melissa hesitated, then nodded. Fabian sat, keeping a respectful distance between them. He didn't crowd her, didn't demand explanations. He simply waited, like he had all the time in the world. "Are you all right?" Fabian asked quietly. The genuine concern in his voice cracked something in Melissa's chest. I don't know. Did Jason do something? Melissa's laugh was bitter. Jason does everything. He owns everything. Including me, apparently. Fabian's jaw tightened. He said that, more or less. Melissa stared at her hands. For 8 months, I didn't exist to him. Now suddenly I'm his property because you caught me when I fell. It doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, Fabian said. To Jason, anyway. He didn't see value in you until someone else did. That's how he operates. Everything is assets and liabilities, possessions and threats. Melissa looked at him. And what am I to you? Fabian met her gaze steadily. Someone who deserves better than being invisible or owned. Those aren't your only options, Melissa. Aren't they? Melissa's voice cracked. I have nowhere else to go. No money, no family, no. She stopped herself, but not quickly enough. Fabian's expression softened. You had family once. Melissa's throat tightened. She shouldn't trust him. She shouldn't tell him anything. But she was so tired of carrying secrets alone, and Fabian's eyes held something Jason's never did, genuine compassion. My brother, Melissa whispered. He died 2 years ago. The police said drunk driving, but Anthony never drank. Never. And now I think Jason knows something about it. Fabian was quiet for a long moment. Why do you think that? Melissa pulled the crumpled note from her pocket and handed it to him. Fabian read it, expression darkening. Melissa, he said carefully, has Jason ever told you why he hired you? No. I thought I was lucky. Stupid, right? Not stupid. Human. Fabian handed the note back. Jason thinks keeping you locked away is protection. But maybe you deserve a choice. Maybe you deserve the truth. And you can give me that? Melissa asked, skeptical. I can help you find it, Fabian said. I know Jason. I know how he thinks, where he keeps things, who he talks to. If there's something to find about your brother, I can help you find it. Why would you help me? Fabian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, real. Because you asked a question, Fabian said softly. And that takes courage in a house where questions get you locked in cages. Melissa stared at their hands. I'm not asking you to trust me completely, Fabian continued. Just trust yourself enough to keep asking questions. The rest will follow. Melissa's chest tightened. For the first time in 8 months, someone was offering her a choice. Okay, she whispered. Fabian smiled. Okay. Melissa didn't knock this time. She walked into Jason's study at 10 o'clock at night, when the estate was quiet and her courage was still holding. Jason looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face before the mask of control slammed back into place. I didn't summon you, Jason said. I don't care. Melissa's voice shook, but she forced herself to stand firm. I want the truth about my brother. Jason's expression went dangerously still. Get out. No. Melissa stepped closer. Anthony C. You have a file on him. You know something about how he died. Tell me. Jason stood slowly, every movement calculated. This is not a conversation you want to have. You don't get to decide what I want. Melissa's hands clenched into fists. You've been deciding things for me since the day you hired me, haven't you? Keeping me in the dark, treating me like furniture, like I'm too fragile or too stupid to handle the truth. I'm done being invisible, Jason. Tell me what happened to Anthony. Something cracked in Jason's expression. Not much, just a hairline fracture in the ice. He looked at her for a long moment, then moved to the bar cart and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He held one out to her. Sit, Jason said quietly. Not a command this time. A request. Melissa took the glass but didn't drink. She sat in the chair across from his desk, spine rigid, waiting. Jason remained standing, staring into his whiskey like it held answers. Your brother worked for me. Low-level operations, deliveries mostly. Nothing dangerous. He was good at his job. Reliable. Quiet. Melissa's chest tightened. I didn't know. He didn't want you to know. He was trying to save money, get you both out of a bad situation. Jason's jaw tightened. 2 years ago, Anthony was making a delivery to one of my warehouses. Wrong place, wrong time. He witnessed something he shouldn't have, Vincent Marino executing one of his own men for disloyalty. The name meant nothing to Melissa, but the way Jason said it, cold lethal, made her blood run cold. Vincent couldn't let a witness live, Jason continued. He took Anthony, tortured him for information about my operations. Anthony didn't break. He didn't give Vincent anything. Jason's knuckles whitened around his glass. I got there too late. Found Anthony in an abandoned building, barely alive. He asked me, begged me to protect his sister. To keep you safe from Vincent. Melissa's vision blurred. He knew he was dying. Yes. Jason finally looked at her. I promised him I would. Then I tracked you down, created a false employment history, and hired you under a cover identity. You've been hiding in plain sight for 8 months while I dealt with the Vincent situation. Dealt with? Melissa's voice cracked. Is he dead? No. But he's contained. For now. Jason set his glass down. You were never just a maid, Melissa. You were a promise I made to a dying man. You were a debt I owed. The words hit Melissa like a physical blow. She stood, legs shaking. So I've been a charity case? A debt to be managed. Jason's silence was answer enough. You let me think I was nothing, Melissa whispered. For 8 months, you made me believe I was invisible, worthless, forgettable. All while you were playing protector without my knowledge or consent. I was keeping you alive. You were keeping me prisoner. Melissa's voice broke. You didn't protect me, Jason. You controlled me. You took away my choices, my agency, my right to know the truth about my own brother's death. You made me a ghost. Jason's mask cracked further. I did what Anthony asked. Anthony's dead. Tears burned Melissa's eyes. And you used his dying wish as an excuse to own me. She turned and walked toward the door. Melissa. Don't, she said without looking back. Just don't. The package appeared on Melissa's bed the next morning. No note, no explanation. Just a large black box tied with a silver ribbon. Melissa stared at it for a long moment before opening it, half expecting something sinister. Instead, she found fabric, deep crimson silk that caught the light like blood and rubies. A dress. She lifted it carefully, and a small card fell out. Fabian's handwriting, neat and confident. Jason's hosting a dinner tomorrow night. Be visible. F. Melissa's hands trembled. She knew what this was, a declaration, a challenge, a calculated move to force Jason's hand. Fabian was giving her a weapon, and the weapon was herself. She should refuse. She should pack the dress back in its box and return it. She should stay invisible, stay safe, stay in the cage Jason had built around her. But Anthony hadn't died begging for her to be safe. He died begging for her to be protected. There was a difference. And Melissa was done confusing the two. The next evening, she stood in her small bathroom, staring at the dress hanging on the back of the door. It was beautiful, sleeveless, fitted through the bodice, flowing at the hips. The kind of dress that demanded attention, that refused to apologize for existing. The kind of dress a ghost couldn't wear. Melissa showered, dried her hair, and for the first time in 8 months, didn't pull it back into the severe bun required of staff. She let it fall loose around her shoulders, dark waves catching the light. She applied makeup, not much, but enough. Enough to look human. Enough to look like a woman instead of a shadow. Then she put on the dress. The silk slid over her skin like water, cool and shocking. Melissa zipped it up, turned to face the mirror, and didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. For 8 months, she'd seen herself as Jason saw her, invisible, functional, forgettable. But this woman in the mirror wasn't any of those things. She was visible. She was present. She was real. Terror and defiance warred in Melissa's chest. She thought about taking the dress off, returning to her uniform, retreating to the safety of invisibility. But then she thought about Anthony's file in Jason's drawer. She thought about 2 years of lies. She thought about Fabian's words, "Maybe you deserve a choice." She thought about Jason saying she belonged to him. Melissa's jaw tightened. If she'd been a pawn in Jason's game, it was time to change the rules. Time to move herself across the board. Time to stop being played. She slipped on a pair of simple heels, the only ones she owned, and took one last look in the mirror. Her reflection stared back, equal parts terrified and fierce. "You can do this," Melissa whispered to herself. Then she opened the door and walked toward the dining room, where powerful men were gathering and Jason Cornelius was waiting. Every step felt like defiance. Every breath felt like reclaiming something stolen. She reached the top of the grand staircase and paused. Below, she could see the dining room through the open doors. Men in expensive suits, crystal glasses catching candlelight, the hum of dangerous conversation. Melissa took a breath and descended. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. The conversation stopped. Heads turned. Eyes found her. And at the head of the table, Jason Cornelius looked up, his whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips, his expression cracking into something Melissa had never seen before. Shock. Anger. And underneath it all, hunger. Beside him, Fabian Crown smiled. Melissa reached the bottom of the staircase and felt every eye in the room dissect her. Fabian moved first, crossing the space with easy confidence. He offered his arm like she was a guest, not staff. "You look extraordinary," he said quietly, eyes warm with approval and something deeper. "I feel like I'm about to be thrown to wolves," Melissa whispered back. Fabian's smile widened. "Good thing I'm excellent with wolves." He led her to the dining table where 6 men sat, all wearing expensive suits and dangerous expressions. Jason remained at the head of the table, posture rigid, jaw tight. His ice-blue eyes tracked every movement, every breath, every inch of distance between Melissa and Fabian. Fabian pulled out the chair beside him, directly across from Jason. "Gentlemen, this is Melissa. Melissa, these are business associates who definitely won't bore you with Mafia politics." He shot a pointed look around the table. "Right." Nervous laughter rippled through the group. Melissa sat, acutely aware of the crimson silk against her skin, of Jason's gaze burning into her, of the power dynamics shifting like tectonic plates. Dinner began. Fabian filled her wine glass, asked her opinion on the menu, included her in conversations about art and travel. Topics that had nothing to do with crime and everything to do with treating her like a person. He touched her arm when making a point, laughed at her observations, created space for her voice in a room designed to silence people like her. Jason said nothing, but his knuckles whitened around his whiskey glass, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. One of the associates, a heavy-set man with a thick accent, leaned forward, grinning. "Jason, I didn't know you'd taken a wife. Where have you been hiding this beauty?" The table went silent. Melissa felt the weight of the question, the assumption buried in it. She belonged to Jason. Of course she did. Everything in this house belonged to Jason. Jason's response was ice. "She's not my wife. She's under my protection." The words hit Melissa like a slap. Under his protection. As if she were a possession, a responsibility, a problem to be managed. Fabian set down his fork deliberately. Protection or possession? There's a difference. Jason's eyes snapped to Fabian. "Careful." "I'm always careful," Fabian said smoothly. "But Melissa isn't a trophy or a pet. She's a person. Maybe you should try remembering that." The tension was suffocating. The other associates exchanged glances, sensing the danger, unsure whether to intervene or watch the carnage unfold. Melissa's heart hammered, but something in Fabian's words, the simple acknowledgement of her humanity, gave her courage. She set down her own fork, looked directly at Jason, and spoke. "I'm neither a wife nor property," Melissa said clearly. "I'm just someone trying to understand the truth." Jason's expression was unreadable, but his eyes blazed. "The truth is dangerous." "So is ignorance," Melissa countered. "You kept me in the dark for 8 months, Jason. You made decisions about my life without my consent. You used my brother's death as an excuse to control me. That's not protection. That's imprisonment." One of the associates whistled low. "She's got fire. She's got a death wish," another muttered. Fabian's hand found Melissa's under the table, steadying. "She's got agency." something you all seem to have forgotten women possess. Jason stood abruptly, chair scraping against marble. Melissa. My office. Now. No, Melissa said. The word echoed in the silence. Jason stared at her like she'd just committed treason. Maybe she had. No. Jason repeated, voice dangerously soft. I'm not one of your soldiers, Melissa said, pulse racing. You don't get to summon me, command me, or decide what I can handle. I'm done following your orders. Jason's jaw clenched. For a moment, Melissa thought he might drag her from the room. But then Fabian stood, positioning himself subtly between them. I think, Fabian said quietly, the lady has made herself clear. Jason looked between them, at Fabian's protective stance, at Melissa's defiant expression. At the shift in power he could no longer control. This dinner is over, Jason said coldly. He turned and walked out, leaving his guests stunned and Melissa trembling with adrenaline and something that felt dangerously like freedom. The alarm shattered the midnight silence like breaking glass. Melissa jolted awake in her small room, heart hammering. Red lights flashed in the hallway outside. Footsteps thundered past her door, guards moving with military precision. Shouting, the unmistakable sound of weapons being loaded. She threw on clothes and stumbled into the hallway. A guard caught her arm. Stay in your room. Lock the door. What's happening? Vincent Marino is at the gate. The name froze Melissa's blood. Vincent, the man who tortured Anthony. The monster Jason had supposedly contained. He was here. For her. She ran toward the main hall, ignoring the guards' protests. Jason stood at the center of the chaos, barking orders into a phone, surrounded by armed men. His eyes found Melissa and went cold. Get her to the safe room, Jason snapped at two guards. Now. The guards moved toward her. Melissa backed away. No. This isn't a negotiation, Jason said. Vincent knows you're here. Someone leaked your location. I'm handling it. You're handling it? Melissa's voice rose. This is my life, Jason. My trauma. My brother's killer at your gate. You don't get to lock me away while you make decisions about my fate. I'm keeping you alive. You're keeping me in a cage. Melissa's hands shook with fury and fear. I'm done hiding. I'm done being your secret, your responsibility, your goddamn promise to a dead man. If Vincent wants me, he can face me. Not you. Me. Jason stepped close, voice dropping to something deadly. If you walk out there, I can't protect you. I don't want your protection anymore, Melissa said. I want my life back. Fabian appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed and armed. His eyes met Melissa's, and he nodded once. Permission. Support. Partnership. Jason saw it. His expression turned murderous. Crown if you help her. Then you'll what? Fabian descended the stairs. She's not yours to control, Jason. She never was. Melissa walked toward the front doors. Jason moved to block her, but Fabian stepped between them. Let her go. She'll get herself killed. Maybe, Fabian said. But it'll be her choice. Melissa pushed through the doors into the cold night. The estate's front gate was 100 yards away, iron bars illuminated by security lights. Beyond them, she could see shapes, men, cars, and at the center, a figure that radiated violence. Vincent Marino. She walked toward the gate on trembling legs. Behind her, she heard Jason cursing, heard Fabian following at a distance, heard guards taking positions. But she didn't stop. She reached the gate and looked through the bars at the man who destroyed her family. Vincent was smaller than she'd imagined, average height, slim build, expensive suit. But his eyes were dead, shark-like, and his smile was the most terrifying thing Melissa had ever seen. The little ghost, Vincent said, voice smooth. Anthony's sister. I wondered if Jason was hiding you here. Took a while to confirm, but patience is a virtue. Melissa's voice shook, but she forced the words out. You took my brother. You tortured him. You tried to erase me. But I'm still here. Vincent's smile widened. The little mouse has claws. He looked past her to where Jason stood, rigid with fury. Jason, your pet has spirit. I like her. I'm not his pet, Melissa said, voice growing stronger. I'm not anyone's. And if you want to finish what you started, you'll have to do it in the open, not in the shadows. I'm done hiding. Vincent studied her, amused. You think bravery will save you? No, Melissa said. But witnesses will. You kill me now, in front of Jason's men, in front of cameras, and it becomes a war you can't win. Anthony died in the shadows because no one was watching. I'm making sure everyone sees. Vincent's amusement faded. He looked at Jason. Smart girl. You trained her well. I didn't train her, Jason said coldly. She did that herself. Vincent's eyes returned to Melissa. This isn't over. I know, Melissa said. But next time I'll be ready. Vincent laughed, turned, and walked back to his car. His men followed. Engines roared to life, and they disappeared into the night. Melissa stood at the gate, shaking, tears streaming down her face. She'd faced the monster. And survived. The estate felt different after Vincent left, quieter, heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. Melissa stood in the front hall, arms wrapped around herself, trembling from adrenaline and the cold night air. Guards secured the perimeter. Fabian spoke quietly into his phone. And Jason stood alone near the window, staring out at the gate where Melissa had faced her brother's killer. Finally, Jason turned. He looked older somehow, the control he wore like armor cracked and showing the man underneath. He walked to Melissa and stopped a few feet away, keeping distance for the first time since he'd claimed her as his. I failed your brother, Jason said quietly. I failed to protect him. And I failed you by trying to control you. I thought I was keeping you safe. He paused, jaw tight. I was keeping you caged. Melissa's throat tightened. This was the apology she'd needed, the acknowledgement that she was more than a promise or a debt. But it was also too late. Too much damage had been done. Thank you for saying that, Melissa said. But an apology doesn't undo 8 months of lies. I know. Jason's eyes held something unfamiliar, regret. What will you do now? Before Melissa could answer, Fabian approached. He looked between them, reading the moment, then focused on Melissa. Can I talk to you? Alone. Melissa nodded. They walked to the garden where they'd first truly spoken, where Fabian had offered her a choice. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Come with me, Fabian said. Not as my possession, not as someone I'm saving. As my equal. We'll face whatever comes together. Melissa looked at him. This man who'd caught her when she fell, who'd seen her when others looked through her, who'd given her weapons and choices instead of cages and commands. I don't need you to save me, Melissa said. I know, Fabian replied, smiling. That's why I'm asking. And Melissa realized the truth. She didn't need either man to save her. She'd saved herself. She'd faced Jason, confronted Vincent, reclaimed her voice and her agency. She was whole on her own. But she wanted Fabian, not because he was safety, but because he'd chosen her as freely as she was choosing him. Not out of obligation or guilt or possessiveness, but out of genuine respect and desire. Melissa stepped closer, reached up, and kissed him. Fabian's arms came around her, steady and warm, and for the first time in 8 months, Melissa felt truly seen. Not as a ghost, not as property, not as a promise. As herself. When they broke apart, Fabian smiled. Is that a yes? It's a yes, Melissa said. They walked back to the house hand in hand. Jason stood where they'd left him, watching. His expression was unreadable, but when his eyes met Melissa's, something passed between them. Acknowledgement, closure, respect. Melissa packed her few belongings in a single bag. She changed out of the red dress and into jeans and a simple shirt. She left the uniform folded neatly on the bed. She wasn't running away. She was walking toward something. Fabian waited by his car. Jason stood at the front door. Melissa stopped at the gate, the same gate where she'd faced Vincent, where she'd refused to hide. She turned back to Jason. Thank you for trying to protect me, Melissa said. But I don't need protection anymore. I need my life back. Jason nodded, and for the first time, his expression held genuine respect. Then take it. You've earned it. Melissa smiled. I already have. She got into Fabian's car. As they drove through the gate and down the long driveway, Melissa looked back once at the mansion that had been her prison and her proving ground. Then she faced forward, toward the road ahead, toward an uncertain but self-determined future. For 8 months, she'd been invisible. Now finally she was free.